حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون وقال تعالى وإلى مدين أخاهم شعيبا قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره ولا تنقصوا المكيال والميزان إني أراكم بخير وإني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم محيط ويا قوم أوفوا المكيال والميزان بالقسط ولا تبخسوا الناس أشياءهم ولا تعثوا في الأرض مفسدين بقية الله خير لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين وما أنا عليكم بحفيظ قالوا يا شعيب وصلاتك تأمرك أن نترك ما يعبد آباؤنا أو أن نفعل في أموالنا ما نشاء إنك لأنت الحليم الرشيد. Dear brothers, respected sisters, in October of 2001, roughly 2 decades ago, the US witnessed the largest bankruptcy at that time of a company that was named as America's most innovative company by Fortune magazine for 6 consecutive years. And along with it, it saw the dissolution of one of the top 5 auditing and accounting companies in the world. That company, that bankrupt company, was Enron, and the auditors were Arthur Andersen. The company misled investors through shady accounting practices and poor auditing until its eventual bankruptcy. And it became a symbol of corporate greed. And if you want to think about, if you want to know how much Enron investors lost because of that corporate greed, they lost $74 billion. Just think of that number, $74 billion. Enron stock went from around $90 in mid-2000s to about 26 cents by the end of 2021. Or sorry, 2001, from 2000 to 2001. People lost their entire life savings. And the question comes up is, how can someone do that? I mean, look at the loss that you caused people. How can someone do that? Take another example. Another person you may have heard of by the name of Bernie Madoff. Madoff was the chairman of NASDAQ in the early 90s and one of the most respected investors at that time. He managed billions of dollars in investments until the end of 2008, when he confessed to running the largest Ponzi scheme in history. For about 17 years, he was doing this. And of course, he wasn't alone in his fraud. There were others who were helping him, and others even suspected of wrongdoing, but they didn't raise any issues because they were also benefiting in the process. Right? The banks where he deposited his funds, it said that they had to know, but why would they raise any issues or raise any concerns when they were earning roughly $500 million through the investments that he had within them? So then who lost? The investors, right? The people. And how much did they lose? About $17 billion of principal investment. 17 billion. Bernie Madoff, who managed billions of dollars in investments, was sentenced to 150 years in prison and went to now making about $40 a month through prison labor. And why did he do this? And that's the mind-boggling part. Why did he do this Ponzi scheme? Why did he defraud people in this manner? He said, and I quote, that I had more than enough money to support any of my lifestyles or my family's lifestyle. I didn't need to do it for that. He didn't do it for just financial gain. And again, the question comes up is, look at the loss that you've lost. You have $17 billion of loss. How can someone do this? Or take a third example, an especially sour one, because this targeted specifically the religious Muslim community within Chicago, where an Islamic investment company run by apparently religiously inclined people duped the Muslim community into halal investments, which turned out to be a $44 million Ponzi scheme. Investors collectively lost $30 million. The Muslim community lost $30 million. Many of them lost their entire life savings. And banks lost another $14 million. And again, the question comes up is, how can someone do this? And the answer to how someone can do that is a person can do that if they lack the fear of disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or otherwise known as taqwa. Right? Taqwa is the fear of disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of fear that you're going to disobey Him. And that lack of taqwa can lead a person to do the most heinous of crimes against both the Creator and the creation. And therefore we see a consistent pattern with all the prophets that when they were sent, their message that they were sent with was on taqwa. Read Surah Shu'ara. You see a pattern of verses, one after another, one after another, one after another. First, about, Allah mentions about the qawm of Nuh alayhi salam. Allah mentions, كَذَّبَتْ قَوْمُ نُوحٍ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. The nation of Nuh, they disbelieved in Nuh. إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ أَخُوهُمْ نُوحٌ لَا تَتَّقُونَ. When Nuh told them that, do you not have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ. I'm a trustworthy messenger to you. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ. So have taqwa. The message was have taqwa and obey Him. وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. I'm not asking you for any compensation in return. My compensation is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was the message of Nuh. And then you see the same pattern of verses. You don't have to necessarily know Arabic to recognize it's the same pattern of verses that comes for different nations and different prophets. Allah goes on to mention that كَذَّبَتْ عَادٌ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Now mentioning about Ad and their prophet Hud. إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ هُودٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Allah mentions the same thing then about Thamud with their prophet Salih. That كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ أَخُوهُمْ صَالِحٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Then the same thing about Qawm Lut, with Lut alayhi salam. That كَذَّبَ قَوْمُ لُوطٍ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ أَخُوهُم لُوطٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And then finally Allah also mentions the same message about Shu'aib alayhi salam that he gave to his people as well. That كَذَّبَ أَصْحَابُ الْأَيْكَةِ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ شُعَيْبٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. That the prophets were sent and each of them reminded their people about taqwa, that be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fear disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because without that a person will do the most heinous of acts. And Shu'aib alayhi salam, he was a great orator, he was a great speaker, he was known as the Khatib al-Anbiya. And he was from the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam, related to Lut alayhi salam as well, and he was the father-in-law of Musa alayhi salam. And his people in the Quran referred to either in two ways, either as Madian or Aika. And Madian was the name of the tribe, and the locality where they lived eventually became known as Madian in modern day East Jordan, and Aika means forest. And whether there was the same people or two people, there's two opinions. One opinion is that there were two different nations, that Shu'aib alayhi salam was sent first to one nation, and that when they disbelieved, they were destroyed, and then he was sent to then the next nation, and eventually they also disbelieved and they were destroyed. And the other opinion, the one that's preferred by Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, is that they were actually the same people, and there were three forms of punishment that came down on them. First was the fire from the clouds. When there was extreme heat, they went under the cloud thinking they're going to get shade, but then they got fire from the clouds. And then there was a sayha, there was a sound, a screeching sound with it, and then also there was an earthquake with that as well. That three different forms of punishment came down on those people. And whether they're the same people or different people, what's important is to understand why were they destroyed, and especially by three forms of punishment. This was a tribe that was heedless of both the huququllah and the huququl ibad, the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rights of people as well. They used to, the Mufassir mentioned that they used to sit at entry points in the street and used to terrorize people by robbing them of their belongings and threatening them if they were to listen to Shu'aib alayhi salam. And regarding the huququl ibad, that these were people who would cheat in their financial transactions. They would cheat in their financial transactions. Allah also mentions that وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ قَدْ جَاءَتْكُم بَيِّنَةٌ مِّن رَّبِّكُمْ فَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. The message that Shu'aib alayhi salam gave to them, in summary, was one calling them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then saying that be fair in your measurements, be fair in your financial dealings. They used to cheat people through fraudulent measurements. And they would, when they had to receive, they would receive full, but when they had to give, they would cheat. And they would not give people what was rightfully due to them. And this is what then Shu'aib alayhi salam told them to leave. And Allah mentions that these actions, these financial transactions that were done with, unethically and with cheating and without doing it in a proper manner, that they caused fasad on the earth, that they caused mischief on the earth, and it was spiritual and it was financial. And hence, Shu'aib alayhi salam then gave da'wah to them, called them for tawheed, called them to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then told them to leave those improper financial transactions. And it's important for us to note that all the previous nations, they were destroyed because they didn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the exception is two nations who are destroyed not only because of their relationship in terms of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also because of their interpersonal relationships as well, the way that they dealt with other people. And these two nations are the Qawm of Lut alayhi salam, because of what they engaged in, and the Qawm of Shu'aib alayhi salam, because of what they were engaging in, which was improper financial transactions. Those two crimes that those two nations were involved in are so hated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that these two nations, when they were then destroyed, they were destroyed because of those actions, and they were destroyed by multiple forms of punishment. Not even one, but multiple forms of punishment. And the reason why the people of Shu'aib, that his qawm would cheat people, has a lot of resemblance to why people cheat today. Allah also mentions in the Quran that وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ وَلَا تَنْقُصُوا الْمِكْيَالَ وَالْمِيزَانَ إِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ بِخَيْرٍ وَإِنِّي أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ عَذَابَ يَوْمٍ مُحِيطٍ. He mentions that I see you well off, right? I see that you're well, meaning that the people, when they were cheating, they weren't doing it because they had some financial need. They weren't in financial difficulty and were cheating people because of those reasons. Rather, what had happened was that this type of cheating just became nature to them. And you think now about the statement of Bernie Madoff, where he said that he did that Ponzi scheme, he did that cheating, that fraud, not because there was a need. Then why? It just became a lifestyle. And there's no barakah or benefit in this type of haram wealth. The Prophet mentioned, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu narrates, that the Prophet mentioned that inna riba wa in kathura aqibatuhu tasiru ila qul. That around riba, as one of the forms of improper financial transactions, the Prophet mentioned that riba, although it seems like it's growing, right? You put money in the bank, you're earning interest on it, it seems as if it's growing, but the Prophet said that the end outcome of that the end outcome of that will be that it will lead to depravity. That it seems like it's growing, but it's not going to grow. It's actually going to cause a loss. In the nation of Shu'aib alayhi salam, they had this misconception that whatever the religion was, that it shouldn't get involved in people's financial transactions. That they said that قالوا يا شعيب أصلاتك تأمرك أن نترك ما يعبد آباؤنا أو أن نفعل في أموالنا ما نشاء إنك لأنت الحليم الرشيد. That, O Shu'aib, that one of the things they said was, does your religion tell you what we should do in our finances? Like, why is religion getting involved in our finances? And sometimes, we see this sometimes in the Muslim community as well, where people, yes, tell me about religion, tell me about fasting, tell me about Hajj, tell me about Salah, do my son's nikah, my daughter's nikah, whatever, but don't tell us to leave certain type of financial transactions, give up my lottery and give up this and give up that. It's a package, right? This is part of a religion, and this is something that's important. And anyone who studied the Sharia in any capacity, or you read the Quran, you know how much emphasis Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in the Quran on financial dealings, on proper financial ethical dealings. Okay? In fact, the longest verse in the Quran is in Surah Baqarah. Okay? And that verse in Surah Baqarah deals with the laws, deals with financial laws. Right? Deals with the laws of contracts. There's more than 20 rulings within that verse, including documentation on financial ethics that pertain to minors, financial ethics that pertain to those who are, have mental deficiencies, on those who are mentally handicapped, those matters that pertain to witnesses, the number, the qualifications, refusing to be a witness, all sorts of rulings within that verse. There's a lot of emphasis that's put within the Quran on proper ethical financial dealings. And unlawful wealth just has no place within the Sharia. The Prophet mentioned, Abdullah bin Mas'ud narrates this, comes in Tirmidhi, that the Prophet mentioned that nobody acquires unlawful property except that it will not be accepted from them. That money that you give in sadaqah, zakat, whatever, is not going to be accepted if it's not earned from a proper means. And this goes beyond just what is permissible. And there's also an aspect of ethics within this. Right? There's an ethics aspect within this. And it's something that we have to be mindful of, something that was stressed in the Quran, stressed in the Hadith. And we see a prophet who came specifically to tell their people to leave their unethical financial dealings. And I'll just conclude by saying that the reason that I'm speaking about the topic also today, it's not just because there's a need of just a reminder for myself and for everyone within the community, but also there's, in the past few weeks, there was somebody who specifically came and complained that they're within a certain profession, without kind of diverging details, they're within a certain profession where they provide services to the Muslim community, our community included, and that there are people who are dealing in unethical manners and extracting services that they haven't been properly paid for and such. And this is something that we have to be mindful of as a community in all of our transactions, not only at the high level. We're not talking just about not engaging in Ponzi schemes, but even something where you hire somebody to mow your lawn, to do household work, to do anything. Any time that we're dealing in any sort of financial transaction, we have to make sure that it's not only permissible in the Sharia, but also it's done within the spirit of the Sharia and it's done in the most ethical manners, and something that's a matter of a lot of importance that we should be giving its due importance. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq, and I ask forgiveness for myself and for everyone. Astaghfirullah li wa lakum wa lisa'il muslimin, fastaghfiruhu innahu huwal ghafurur rahim. Alhamdulillah alladhi hada wa salatu wa salamu ala ibadihi alladhina istafa, خصوصا على سيد الرسل وخاتم الأنبياء وعلى آله وصحبه الذين اجتباه أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداءك أعداء الدين اللهم انصر المسلمين والمستضعفين في كل مكان اللهم اشفنا واشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين واشفنا شفاء كاملا عاجلا لا يغادر سقما اللهم اكفنا بحلالك عن حرامك واغننا بفضلك عمن سواك اللهم انا نسالك العفو والعافيه والمعافاه الدائمه في الدين والدنيا والاخره عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون أقيموا الصلاة. who are in the back, they're waiting to form a saf. Please